All right, I just got the sign. We are live for the week 3 edition of the Phil Steele Show. I'm Trip Hurd. I've got David Kahn with me alongside of our guy Phil Steele. We're live today, so if you follow us on Twitter at CSN Now Tweets at Phil Steele 042 is Phil's handle. You can join us live. We appreciate all the views we've gotten on YouTube through the first couple of weeks, and of course, everybody listening on the podcast version as well. Phil, nice weekend, week 2. Your top 3 plays went 3-0. I mean, I'm not the best at math, but I think that's pretty good. UNC covered for you. Oregon got the easy win. Utah State, like you called it, they should have been favored in that game. I mean, really,
New Mexico
Oregon,
State.
I missed who?
New Mexico State.
New Mexico State. Sorry. Yeah, they should have been favored in that game. But Oregon, what they're doing to people, especially a program like Oklahoma State, I mean, they should put like a parental guidance warning on some of these games. I just couldn't believe the score when I saw it there. But how we doing, Phil?
I'm doing well. How about you guys today?
I mean, where would you rather be than on the Phil Steele Show, right? We're going to go through 25 to 30 games here in the next hour or so, get you all the angles for some of these games. We've got a lot of, some of the same stuff from week 2 with some of the heavy hitters playing some smaller schools. So we found some games that have some tight lines, and we found some games that, maybe there's just going to be an angle or two to play on there. David Kahn, you're back here. You've been moping around all week. Your lock of the week, Kansas, didn't come through. I mean, they look good at times in that game. They certainly did. But how you doing, man?
It was tough. Kansas had it on lock until 8:45 to play in that fourth quarter, and then Missouri just became an absolute juggernaut, and the game was over. So that was a tough one to lose. But we get off the mat, we rebound, we celebrate the fact that Phil went 3 for 3 because that's what matters the most here on the show. Phil nailing his top plays because Phil Steele gives out winners, and that's what we do on the Phil Steele Show. So happy for Phil. And we move on to week 3, Trip. That's all we got.
But that Missouri game, I mean, Kansas punted the ball. So Missouri needs 2 first downs. They run out the clock. They're 75 yards away from the end zone. You pretty much have that thing covered, David. And then the run down the left sideline for 66 yards and a touchdown. Had he gone out of bounds or got stopped or somebody knocked him somewhere, they would have simply ran out the clock. It should have been a win for Kansas.
It was a great game, and hopefully they'll keep playing it every year too. I don't think we need to go another 10 years or whatever between matchups between those two.
Totally agree, Trip. Totally agree.
You want to start us off, Dave? Thursday night?
Yeah, let's go. We got some action on Thursday, so we got to touch every game of the week, Phil. So tonight, here in the town of Winston-Salem, North Carolina, where Trip and I reside, we start off with NC State and Wake Forest. NC State currently favored by 7.5 points in the home of the Demon Deacons, which has been renamed a bunch of times, now a Legacy Stadium. This is the start of what I call prove yourself week, Phil, because I feel like there's so many teams we still don't know who they are, even if they're unbeaten. Both NC State and Wake Forest are 2-0. For the Wolfpack, their defense has made the difference in the end in both games. They got the interception in the end zone last week to stop Virginia's chance to snatch a win in Raleigh. 35-31 NC State win. CJ Bailey has looked solid, but I have no idea what we've got in Wake Forest either, because I was at that game against Kennesaw State. They played horribly, won 10-9. That was not a football game. I don't know what that was, but it wasn't football. And then they trounced Western Carolina by 32 points this past week. So we're going to find out which of these two teams is, what they have truly this week as they start ACC play. What do you got here? NC State favored by 7.5, taking the trip down I-40 to play the Demon Deacons.
Well, making the case for Wake in the opening game against Kennesaw State, their star player, and I mean their star player, Damon Claiborne, I think was injured and out after 3 carries, didn't play the rest of the game. He returned last week, had a big game against Western Carolina, but of course, Western Carolina, just an FCS school. I do think Robbie Ashford and Purdy have combined to do fairly well at the quarterback spot, but we will learn a lot more about them this week. As you mentioned, NC State, 2 close wins you wonder if he could keep it going. But when I look at these two teams, I think Wake's a completely new team over last year, new coach, ton of transfers coming in. Yes, Claiborne is there, but NC State's a proven team. And I like the way CJ Bailey's playing. I like Hollywood Smothers as well. I think NC State's capable of going on the road and getting the cover here. So I'm going to go with the Wolfpack in this one, minus the points.
Yeah, I just told David right before we hopped on the show, a little birdie told me that the under is a very good play here in this game as well. I think it's sitting at 52.5.
Yep.
I'm not going to out him because he's one of the main revolving characters here on College Sports Now. But I've been told that under 52.5 is a very good play tonight in Winston-Salem. Moving on to Friday night, we've got a nice Big 12 matchup to start things off. Remember Connor Wegman from Texas A&M? You know what he's doing now? He's running the offense for Willie Fritz at Houston. They've got the Cougars off to a 2-0 start. Competition's going to get a little tougher this week. They've got Colorado in town. Apparently, Ryan Staub will be the starter for Colorado this week. That's what I've heard. Keep an eye on that. But really, for Houston, the defense has been the story through the first 2 weeks. I know the competition hasn't been great, but they've only given up a total of 9 points through their first 2 outings. Phil, what do you like in this one?
Yeah, and the defense has not only been the story this year, but last year as well. I know Houston was 4-8 last year, but if you watch this team, they were a much better squad defensively. They basically just had no offense, which is why they lost the games. But on the season, they held foes to 75 yards per game below their season average, which was actually a top 20 defense last year. And this year, they lost their defensive coordinator, so I was a little concerned, but they're playing great defense, like what they've done against both SS Austin and Rice. Offensively, though, they have an offense this year. And as you mentioned, Connor Wegman doing a good job at quarterback. He's hitting 66% with a 4.0 ratio. Their running back, Dean Connors, he was the best offensive player Rice had the last 2 years. He's here. He's got nearly 200 yards rushing. So it's good to finally have an offense. I don't like the fact Colorado's juggling quarterbacks like they are. I think that's a tough thing to do at the start of the year. It's too bad one of their 3 guys didn't win the job and is firmly entrenched there. And I think going on the road, playing this defense with an improved offense, I like Houston minus the 4.5 in this one. I think they're a good play at home. And Willie Fritz is going to do a great job at Houston. Last year was year 1, but this is year 2. You're going to see a much different Cougar squad.
Yep. Phil, I've always got a soft spot in my heart for Willie Fritz, former head coach of my Tulane Green Waves. So, going to enjoy the Houston pick there. Daryl Turner, who's watching on YouTube right now, also says don't like Colorado, love Houston. So everybody in agreement to take the Cougars against Colorado at home this week. Sticking on Friday, we have a very interesting game that I'm very curious to get your thoughts on, Phil. Kansas State at 1-2, favored on the road in Tucson by 1.5 at Arizona, who's unbeaten. 9 p.m. out in the desert. This is not a conference game. It was on the schedule before Arizona came to the Big 12. The question for Kansas State, right, is are we hitting the panic button? They lost to Iowa State in Ireland. They got Service Academy last week by Army 24-21, and they barely squeaked out a win over North Dakota. I don't think it's time to panic because you look at the game last week, Kansas State only touched the ball twice in the second half. Army consumed 27 minutes of game clock in the second half with their 5 drives. So really, I think, again, you don't really know what you have in Kansas State quite yet because they haven't played, but one true kind of normal game for them. Arizona, on the other side, they've pounded inferior opponents 88-9, but now how will Noah Fafita fare against a much better defensive team in Kansas State that's only allowing 333 yards of total offense per game? What do you think about this one? I don't think it's time to panic in the Little Apple yet for Kansas State.
Yeah, and I think the key stat in that Army-Kansas State game is that Army converted on 6 of 7 on 4th down. In fact, the key play of the game was right before the half. Last play of the half, 4th and goal at the 2-yard line. They opt to go for it. They're down 13-0. They get the touchdown. I think that was really the key play of the game. There was later, I think, a 4th and 6 conversion that they got, which is very un-Army-like, and it was a nice win for Army. But as you touched on, you still feel Kansas State has more talent for this one. I thought they played Iowa State very even, could easily have won. Same thing with Army. The North Dakota State one, you could chalk that up to coming back from Ireland and playing the next week. Arizona, though, is a much different animal than last year. Last year, Brett Brennan took over this team late. it was basically Noah Fafita and Tatoria McMillan. McMillan's gone. I think they have more balance in the receiving core this year, and they are a much improved team. Whereas last year they were extremely inexperienced, much more veteran team this year. They're at home playing with confidence. I can make a case for either squad, so I'm going to leave it up to you two. Which one of you two's got to play on this game?
Oh man, Trip, do you have one? Because I got one, but I have not felt good about it all week. I don't know.
I feel like you're leaning K-State.
I am, and I hate it. I really do.
Well, you don't have to pick it, but if
I don't want to, but that's my lean is Kansas State, but I absolutely hate it.
My lean would probably be Arizona just because they're at home.
Yeah, and that's why I hate my Kansas State lean, but I believe in the Wildcats. I don't know why. I just do. That I have no logic there beyond the fact that I believe in them. That's it.
Well, speaking of believing in teams, I don't know why I'm even bringing up the UCLA Bruins right now after what they've done to me in the first 2 weeks of the season. I faded Utah in week 1, just because I thought I'd be cute, and everybody's on Utah. They're so improved. Well, maybe everybody got it wrong. They didn't. They were right. Utah looked great. And then I thought, well, they've got to bounce back against UNLV. They didn't. UCLA is 134th nationally in point differential in the first quarter. Like, they're digging holes early every single week. They've got to stop doing that. There's something like 5 for 800 on third down conversions. It's a terrible number. Why am I considering playing these guys again here this week, though, Phil? Let's see. What is the line? 15.5. They're favored over New Mexico. They're back at home. The total's 52.5. But I'm telling you, the 3-strike rule is in effect for UCLA.
Yeah, it would have to be. And, in this one, I'm with you, Trip. I actually lean with UCLA, and I'll give you the reasons why. First of all, Tennessee fans love what's happening at UCLA. You know that, right? Because Nico left them. They're doing well. Nico is struggling. And they're pretty happy. I imagine UCLA games get a much higher viewership now that all the Tennessee faithful are watching them late at night. However, in this game, it's an absolutely desperate game for UCLA. And the thing I did see last week was it made the comeback against UNLV. They were thoroughly dominated in the first half, down 23-3, pulled within 7, and were driving until they were intercepted deep in UNLV territory late in the game. So they showed a little bit of resolve. New Mexico did impress me against Michigan in the opener. They only trailed 27-17 in the fourth quarter. Michigan got a late touchdown to make that a 17-point game. Last week, Jack Lane, I expected a better game out of him against Idaho State, a team he had actually played 3 straight years when he was the quarterback at Idaho. Didn't have an overwhelming game there. They beat Idaho State, but they were actually outgained in that game and out first down. So I think New Mexico going on the road against a desperate UCLA team that absolutely needs a win. I'm going to lean with UCLA in this. I can guarantee it wouldn't be one of my top 10 picks of the week, but I would lean with UCLA. I'm going with you, Trip.
Same.
I think we could all agree on that one there. Let's move to Saturday. We started off with number 13 Oklahoma coming off a high-flying win over Michigan, where they looked the absolute real deal last week, took care of business against the Wolverines, a heavy favorite on the road at a 2-0 Temple team. That's a noon kickoff at Lincoln Financial Field in Philadelphia. Before we get into this game, that's where our folks from Home Field Apparel are going to be for the second stop on their Can't Miss Kickoff Tour. So need to give you all the details on that. Friday, September 12th, Saturday, September 13th. Home Field will be there for the Can't Miss Kickoff Tour presented by Modelo. Special guest Jack DeLongchamp of a bunch of different things will be there as well. Make sure on Friday you check out the Boomer Sooner Happy Hour at the Garage Rittenhouse from 5 to 9. And on Saturday, the OU Alumni Tailgate at Xfinity Live from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. Get more details at Home Field Apparel on Instagram or Home Field Apparel without the E on Twitter for that. And if you can't get to there, make sure you check out homefieldapparel.com. They've got quality, thoughtful apparel for more than 190 colleges and universities. They have 2025 Platinum football boxes, whiteout and blackout bomber jackets for 8 select schools. Go to homefieldapparel.com. Use the code PHIL15. That's PHIL15 for 15% off your first order at homefieldapparel.com. I'm repping my Home Field Apparel Tulane hoodie because Tulane's got a big game this week. We are talking about that one later on in the show. The Darien Mensa Bowl, that's coming up later on, but I'm repping that. Make sure you get yours and rep yours. Homefieldapparel.com, proud sponsor of the Phil Steele Show. All right, game time. Oklahoma at Temple. Both teams 2-0. As I said, Oklahoma looked tremendous against Michigan. John Mateer, 3 total scores. The defense held the Wolverines under 300 yards. Here's an interesting stat on the defense, Phil. The Sooners have not allowed a single point in the first, second, and fourth quarters so far through 2 games. So Oklahoma's defense has been locked and loaded, except for the third quarter. But Casey Keeler, I think, has done a great job so far at Temple. The Owls are 2-0, looking to start 3-0 for the first time since 2015. Evan Simon tops in the American in passing efficiency, and he has more touchdown passes than incompletions. It's a hefty line, but Oklahoma looks like the real deal. What do you got here in Philadelphia this weekend?
Well, as you know, Oklahoma is my number 1 surprise team in the country. They're coming off a 6-7 season last year. I said they're a playoff contender, and they sure looked like it against Michigan. This is a rare week. Rare in the fact that I'm actually picking against Oklahoma in a week. Not to lose the game, naturally. No way. But they're laying over 3 touchdowns. And last week, massive home crowd, playing Michigan at home. Next week, at home, SEC opener, Auburn. Now you're playing in Philadelphia. The crowd is much smaller, completely different environment. And here's the thing. Last week, Oklahoma ran the ball 40 times. John Mateer basically took 20 of those carries. They need to work on that run game. They need to get those running backs like Javonte Barnes, Jade Knott going. So I think you're going to see them slow the game down a little bit, work on getting these running backs going before they play Auburn. Meanwhile, you hit it right on the head. Temple, under Casey Keeler, having a fantastic year. I mean, granted, they played UMass and Howard, and there's not a single player on UMass's defense or Howard's defense that would probably be on the second string of Oklahoma's defense. It's a completely different defense. But I like the fact they're taking care of the ball. You hit it on it, that Temple is actually completing 80% of their passes. They're also using Giovanni McCoy, who came over from Oregon State. And those two have combined for a 10-0 ratio this year. They got Jay Ducker, who last year at Sam Houston had a really good year. He's got over 200 yards in 2 games. So I think they play small ball like they've been doing this year. Keep it low. I think it'll be a lower scoring game. That's probably your best bet here. But also the fact I'll take Temple plus the 3 touchdowns in a big flat spot. Remember the flat spot LSU was in against Louisiana Tech last week? Coming off that big game against Clemson, they had Florida on deck, and they pretty much sleepwalked against Louisiana Tech. Needed a late touchdown to get it where it was. So I'll take Temple plus the points here.
All right. I think we all liked Clemson last week to cover a big spread. I know one of our viewers had commented on that with their play, but they were fighting for their lives, down 16-0 in the second quarter against Troy. I saw the line for the game this week. Clemson at Georgia Tech, noon kick. I think it opened at like 9.5. Yep. And currently, I mean, when I made my notes, it was 3.5. Now I'm seeing 2.5. You know how much I like Georgia Tech. I was going to still roll with the Jackets here, but boy, that line is just going down by the second. Clemson hasn't lost to Georgia Tech since 2014, 9-1 in the last 10, and they're 7-2-1 ATS in those meetings. But I feel like I talked about the Yellow Jackets so much, I kind of have to stick with them right now, Phil. I think you like the other side in this one, though.
Yeah, I'm going to leave with Clemson. First of all, 9.5, I don't think ever happened. The opening numbers I saw were in the 4 to 5 range, which is pretty much where it should be for this game. Because if you look at the two teams, Georgia Tech is a legitimate ACC title contender this year. They've got Haynes King at quarterback. Now, they rested him last week. Aaron Philo did a great job. Threw for over 300 yards, 373 yards against Gardner-Webb last week. And they just throttled GW in a game that I thought GW had a chance to keep closer than the final score. They look good in the first half against Colorado. And this is a Georgia Tech team under Brent Key that they don't only cover against ACC-ranked teams. They've played 6 of them since Brent Key's taken over. They've won 5 of them outright. So they're extremely dangerous. But the spread has come down so far that Clemson is the better team. I think they're the best team in the ACC this year. Cade Klubnik has not looked good. As you mentioned, they were down 16-0. And even in the second half, when they came back and won it, they only finished the game with 316 yards. I expected more out of their offense. I think we will see Clemson show up to be the team we thought they were at the start of the year and look a lot better this week. So I'm going to call for Clemson. It's going to be close. It's going to be a tight game. But since they're only laying 3 in this one, I'll take Clemson minus the points.
and still undetermined, Phil, if Haynes King is going to start for Georgia
He'll
Tech
play.
this week. Yeah,
He'll
it trending in the right direction, says Brent Key, which is, coach speak for I'm not telling
Haynes
you.
King will play if he had one arm hanging off his shoulder. He'll play in this game.
Well, that was such a big question for Georgia Tech. Can they keep Haynes King healthy? They can't, but maybe if they can just work the schedule, easy game, hard game, maybe it can still work out for them.
But I got to be honest, Phil, you said this earlier in the week with Wayne Cook and Stephen Hartzell on your Tuesday show. Aaron Philo's not a bad backup. Like, I'm all right with this. He can play.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
every time Aaron Philo's come in, there's been no difference in the offense. So I'm happy with Philo at quarterback or Haynes King. It's one of the better backup combos in the country.
Absolutely. So we stay with the noon window here as we go to Tuscaloosa. 2-0 Wisconsin heading to face number 19 Alabama. Again, another very large line. Alabama laying 20.5 at home. Wisconsin coming off a beatdown of Middle Tennessee, 42-10 win, but that was at home. This is the first road game of the year for the Badgers. Alabama, meanwhile, drubbed Louisiana Monroe 73-0. Ty Simpson a perfect 17 for 17 with 3 touchdowns, albeit against ULM. They recover from that week 1 loss against Tripp's beloved Florida State Seminoles. Last year, Alabama went to Madison and crushed the Badgers 42-10. And now they're at home, where Alabama has won 85 consecutive games at home against unranked opponents. Phil, I think you're leaning with the Tide here as well to keep that streak going.
Yeah, first of all, let's go back to last year's game for a second. It's 14-3. I thought Wisconsin had played Alabama pretty much even up. In fact, if you look at the yards and the first downs at the half, they were basically even at that point. Wisconsin lost their starting quarterback in late first quarter, start of the second. And Wisconsin's lining up for a field goal to make it 14-6. So it's a ball game. First downs are even at 9. They miss the field goal. Alabama gets a big 60-yard touchdown pass, and all of a sudden it's 21-3 at the half. Wisconsin can't play catch-up football, and Alabama rolled them in the second half. So really the first half, I was impressed with what Wisconsin did in last year's game. Now this year, taking a look at the two teams, Wisconsin lost their quarterback again at Billy Edwards. Now he's going to travel and play, but they had one of the best backup quarterbacks out there in Danny O'Neal. He was a starter for San Diego State. And he did well last week against Middle Tennessee. Did well against Miami of Ohio in the opener. In fact, moved the offense a little bit better, and Billy Edwards has moved them in the Miami game. But this is one of those where Wisconsin just can't keep up if Alabama gets ahead. And, wow, I didn't know what to expect from Bama last week. I thought they would come back with a vengeance. I was hoping they'd come back with a vengeance. But the way they throttled ULM, leading that one 42-0 at the half with a 334 to 43-yard edge, really showed me what they've got. This is an Alabama team I thought was a national title contender at the start of the year. Maybe they were overconfident against Florida State. I think you're going to see Alabama continue to roll on a weekly basis. Get this thing while it's 20.5. That's a good number. Get it before it rises over 21.
Okay. One game left in the noon window. We talked about Troy already. They played Clemson so tough on the road last week. Now they return home, and they'll be an underdog against Memphis. Tigers are 2-0 straight up and against the spread to start the season. Right now I'm seeing 3.5 is the number here. Brendan Lewis, he hasn't topped 200 yards through the air yet, only 1 touchdown to 1 pick ratio. However, he's completing 80% of his passes, so he's been super efficient for Silverfield down there. This will be the toughest test for the Tigers so far. Should be a good game here, Phil.
Yeah, I think it will be a good game. And, Memphis is 2 different teams. At home, they're almost unbeatable. On the road, they're very beatable. And that was part of the reasons why I didn't pick them to win the American Conference last year, because they had their toughest games on the road. That's one of the reasons I picked them to win the American Conference this year, because they have their toughest games at home. And as you mentioned, there's a lot of question mark how you're going to replace a 4-year starting quarterback in Seth Hennigan. But Brendan Lewis has done well. I'd like to get a little more production out of the running back core, although they're balanced. They're using a running back by committee and running the football well with over 200 yards per game. Now, Troy looked great against Clemson in the first half, and Goose Crowder's having a fine season. Now, he has tossed 3 picks. We worry a little bit about that. But Tay Meadows at running back has got nearly 300 yards rushing, averaging 6.7 yards per carry. So Troy's going to be fired up. They're at home. I still feel Memphis is the better team, and the spread's so doggone cheap here. I think one of the reasons Memphis hasn't covered on the road is that they're usually laying a lot more. I'll take Memphis minus the short line here.
All right, Phil. Let's go to the 3:30 window here. Number 6 Georgia at number 15 Tennessee. This is a big game of the week. I'm honestly super excited for this one. Georgia has owned this series in recent memory, winning 8 straight. They had a tremendous game last year. Georgia climbed out of that 10-0 hole to win 31-17. Bulldogs kind of played with their food a little against Austin Peay. That Gunnar Stockton looked solid, 26 for 34. They ran the ball like crazy. College game days in town. And this is another one of those prove-it games, I think, for Tennessee, because we're going to see what Joey Aguilar can do for real after beating up on Syracuse and East Tennessee State. They demolished them last week, 72-17. That Vols defense has been swarming. They have the second most pass breakups so far in FBS. But I saw a note recently, Tennessee hasn't scored more than 17 points against Georgia in the Josh Heupel era. So can Tennessee put up enough to overcome a feisty Georgia defense who's favored by 3.5 on the road?
Yeah, the key for Tennessee is running the football, believe it or not. And when they run the ball effectively, they win. When they don't run the ball effectively, they lose. And that's been the case against Georgia. And I think this Georgia defense is much better than last year's Georgia defense. So they don't have the star players that those national championship editions did. But I think when you look at this team at the end of the year, it will be one of the best defenses in college football. And the one thing about Kirby Smart, this guy's one of the worst home favorites out there, one of the worst 20-plus favorites out there. He doesn't care about the score. He plays a lot of players, especially on the defensive side of the ball. He'll go 3-4 deep if they can on the defense, and that's why you see him not covering games against Marshall and Austin Peay. Go back to that Marshall game for a minute. You know, Marshall ended up with 202 yards. They had 1 first down after 3 quarters of play. That's how good the Georgia defense is. They just don't care what the final score is in those games. However, Kirby Smart's an excellent away favorite. As you've mentioned, they match up extremely well against Tennessee. They've not only won the last 8, they win them by like 18 points per game. They're not even close. And watch Joey Aguilar here. You know, at App State last year, he had 14 interceptions, which was the most in the FBS. He's been throwing some balls that could have gone either way. They took on a weak Syracuse defense. They took on an even weaker East Tennessee State defense. If he's throwing the ball up for grabs against this Georgia defense, you're going to see some interceptions. So I think Georgia takes away the run, pulls off a few interceptions, and gets the offense rolling. I think you'll see Georgia's A game this week. I like the Bulldogs to go on the road and get the win by more than the 3.5.
Well, Phil, that's kind of been one of our rules here on the show, if I'm correct, for like the last 3 or 4 years. When Georgia's on the road as a favorite, they're way better than they are at home as a favorite. So I like your side there in that one. Of course, the first time we take the show live this season, we're having all kinds of technical issues in the background. You see David just dropped off because his mic quit working, so he's trying to re-enter the studio and get back on there. I'm getting notifications that I have to restart my computer right now from my company because it's some urgent thing, but I'm just going to keep hitting the delay button until they tell me otherwise. So moving along here, in the 3:30 window, I've got another team on my 3-strike rule very early. And this team has been in my top level of plays the first couple of weeks. Oregon State. How are we 0-2 starting at home in Research Stadium where they've been so good over the years? It's not going to get any easier on the road this week in Lubbock, taking on Texas Tech, a team that's averaging basketball numbers on offense right now. 62 in their first game, 67 last week. Obviously, the competition hasn't been great against Arkansas, Pine Bluff, and Kent State. But Morton's looked really good at quarterback, 7 touchdowns, 0 picks. Do you have a side in this one, Phil?
Yeah, I'm actually going to lean with Oregon State. And the main reason is this. They are off a misleading final. And I love teams that are off misleading finals. You know, you look at the final score of last week's game, they lost to Fresno State by 9, right? So they really were non-competitive at home against Fresno State. Pump the brakes there. You know, they lost their long snapper prior to the game. So bad snap on a punt turns out to be a Fresno touchdown. Bad snap, punter goes to a knee, turns out to be a Fresno score once again. In the game, Oregon State had 30 first downs. Fresno State had 15. They had 528 yards to 318. And even at the end of the game, Oregon State is winning with a minute to go by a point. And the only reason they're only up by a point, despite giving Fresno 2 scores like they did, is they went for the 2-point conversion 4 times and lost all 4 points, or else they would have been up by 5 and covering the spread. Fresno goes down, kicks the game-winning field goal with 20 seconds left. Then, with basically no time left on the clock, 1 second, they get an interception return for a touchdown. It turns into a 9-point win, even though Oregon State completely dominated the game. So with that said, I love going with teams like that because the average fan just looks at the final score of the game and says they suck. But when you look at the game, they actually played a lot better. And believe it or not, Texas Tech, despite that big win over Kent State last week, they didn't cover. They actually scored a last touchdown and still didn't cover in the game. It's not like Kent scored the last couple of plays. So there's one other thing about this one. Texas Tech has Utah on deck. That is a massive game.
Yeah.
So I'm going to lean with Oregon State plus the points in this one.
I'll roll with you one more time.
One more time.
We're going to try one more time. David, are you back there?
I'm back. Sorry, guys. Audio issues, but we're back, baby. All right. Three strike rule, right? 3 strike rule.
Yeah.
We got some calls in the chat for an Oregon or a Texas Tech blowout, but we'll ride the Beaver train one more time. All right. Let's go to Denton, Texas. Phil, North Texas hosting Washington State. North Texas favored by 5.5. Washington State coming off an absolute demolition of San Diego State last week, 36-13. I thought Jackson Potter looked really good. The offense racked up nearly 400 yards. Jimmy Rogers, the first Washington State head coach to win his first 2 games at WSU since 1989. And now he takes the Cougars to the state of Texas the first time in 4 years, where they face their former offensive coordinator, Eric Morris, who's now the head coach at North Texas. They barely survived last week in Kalamazoo, 33-30 in overtime as Mackenzie McGill has that game-winning score after they rally from 14 down. North Texas getting the 5.5-point favorite line at home. Both teams 2-0. Where's your lean here, Phil?
Yeah, I'm going to go with North Texas in this, and it's one of those where you can't overreact to last week's results. First of all, Washington State in the opener against Idaho barely got past them. As you mentioned, Potter looked much better last week. However, this is his first road start. What have we seen from quarterbacks in their first road start? They've struggled. And North Texas, meanwhile, last week my biggest concern for them was they're going all the way up north to face Western Michigan, a completely different type of environment for these kids from Texas. And as you mentioned, they trailed the entire game. Sort of fortunate to come out of the win with overtime. However, they're back at home. At home, they tend to dominate. Last year, they beat Wyoming 44-17. At home, they beat Tulsa 52-29. So they can blow teams out at home. I think the spread probably would have been 10 prior to last week's games, and it's all the way down to 5.5 because of last week's results. I'll take that line value this week. I like North Texas minus the points.
All right, let's go to the Big Ten. What's gotten into Purdue this year? It looks like they're back away. Boilermakers are 2-0. They won their first 2 games by a combined 65-17. USC in town this week in West Lafayette. It's a 3:30 kick in Ross-Ade. The Trojans, a 3-touchdown favorite. I'm actually seeing 20.5 right now as the current number, averaging 676 yards per game, which is pretty good. 11 yards per play. Mayavas look good. But does Purdue have any shot to cover here, Phil? I'm just asking because, it looks like they have a pulse again. So I want to get Purdue back on the Phil Steele show this week. So we're squeezing them in here. What do you like in this one?
Barry Odom did a great job at UNLV last year. So the last 2 years, I should say. And it looks like he's turning some magic here. This is an Indiana team that brought in a lot of transfers. Sound familiar? Indiana last year made the playoff. Forget about it. This is a contender versus a pretender. Purdue has been fortunate. They played Ball State and Southern Illinois to open. They were actually outgained at the half by Southern Illinois, 217-204. Not as dominant. Yes, they've looked good. They're taking a completely different animal on here. Now, USC has struggled on their trips to the East. However, D'Anton Lynn, his defenses are outstanding. This is probably the best defense Lincoln Riley's had offensively. They've got Maeva. I love the way Jordan's running the football. He's got averaging over 10 yards per carry. And then when you get the lead, and it's the fourth quarter, They go to Husan Longstreet off the bench, and Longstreet's hit 13 to 13 passes. He's a BHT quarterback, a freshman that they want to get ready for the future. So they will score a touchdown late in this game if you're worried about the spread. Unfortunately, no backdoor cover here. I just think USC is a legitimate contender in the Big Ten, a team that at one point last year was 6-5 and was 5 plays away from being 11-0 versus a Purdue team that's going to get exposed this week. I like USC minus the points.
Chat tends to agree with you, Phil. Also calling for the over for USC against Purdue. All right, big game in the 3:30 window, and one that will certainly be a large deciding factor in both of these team seasons. It's the backyard brawl, Phil. Pitt at West Virginia. The Panthers 2-0, West Virginia 1-1. WVU's down bad. Like there's no way around saying it. They got upset at Ohio. Jaheim White, their starting running back, star wide receiver Jaden Bray, both out for the year. One of their best linebackers, Reed Carrico, might be out for this game too. The line opened at just 2.5. It shifted heavily in Pitt's favor following the injury news by 4 points. Pitt's now laying 6.5 in Morgantown, but it's the backyard brawl. You can throw everything out the window when these two teams meet. We don't know who Pitt is yet. They haven't played anybody. They've beaten Duquesne and Central Michigan. Eli Holstein's put up decent numbers, but against inferior competition, that's what you should do. What are you feeling here in the backyard brawl, Pitt, West Virginia?
Yeah, and normally I'm with the rivalry dog, right? Like Iowa last week against Iowa State. I'll always take the rivalry dog. However, this West Virginia team has so many freaking transfers. Do these guys even know about this rivalry? I mean, they brought in like 30 guys after spring practice was over, 45, 50 guys. There's like 80 new players here on the West Virginia team. There's not like a bunch of West Virginia guys. Meanwhile, Pitt's an experienced team. They know about the backyard brawl. They played in the backyard brawl last year. And remember last year, Pitt was 7-0 when Eli Holstein was healthy. Then he got injured. And in the last 6 games, he only had an 0-2 ratio in the little time he did play. And Pitt lost 6 games. Well, Holstein's back. They've got Desmond Reed at running back. They've got an outstanding defense. The thing I want you to watch here is the interior West Virginia's offensive line struggled last week against Ohio. That's Pitt's strength on the defensive front. Watch those defensive tackles working against the interior of the offensive line against Pitt or against West Virginia. I think they're going to have an advantage. They're going to get after the quarterback. They're going to slow him down. And we saw last week with Narduzzi, they got that late touchdown against Central Michigan, 45 seconds left to get the cover of the game. So I think they will score late if they're given the opportunity. A lot of hate in this series. Pitt will travel some fans. I mean, these two schools fairly close. So as much as I love rivalry dogs, I'm going to go with Pitt minus the points here.
Trip, lock of the week.
All right. Lock of the week.
Pitt minus 6.5.
Lock of the week. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Mark it down.
You're doing good when we keep it to one pick.
Yep.
You're doing good.
I'm only picking one.
You're only
lock of the week.
That's great. All right. I love it.
Drop the hammer, and then West Virginia's season is basically over.
Well, the team that messed up your lock of the week last week, Missouri. Let's talk about Missouri. Are we feeling good about ourselves, Missouri fans, after that big rivalry game last week? Watch out, because I think you're in a trap game this week right now. Louisiana, Raging Cajuns coming to town. You've got South Carolina on deck next week. The Tigers gave up 160 on the ground to Central Arkansas in week 1. I'm pretty sure Coach Drink had enough of that. I think I saw they only gave up like 15 yards rushing last week against Kansas. Really good against the run. I don't know, Phil. Mizzou seems to always be kind of under the radar. Very good team. And as far as SEC schedules go, looking ahead, they've got a pretty, I don't know if you want to call it workable, but is this just a good spot here for Louisiana getting, looks like 27.5? Is that
27.5.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is a flat spot for Missouri. They got South Carolina coming up on deck. I will say this, Missouri's defense is very good, but they got a very fortunate cover last week. Purbulla has looked better than expected, hitting 78% of his passes with a 5-0 ratio. And, of course, Louisiana lost their quarterback, Walker Howard, in week 1. Daniel Beal has taken over that spot. I like their running back combo, though, with Davis and Perry. I think that's a good combo, and they should be able to shrink the game, keep it close. Very disappointed Louisiana lost their opener to Rice. I've got Louisiana favored to win their division in the Sun Belt Conference, but they did miss 2 late field goals, or they could have won that game. So I think this is going to be a lower scoring game. You're not going to see Missouri come out with the same effort they did last week, especially with South Carolina on deck. And I'll take the points with Louisiana.
All right. Let's.
Oh, you got another
sorry,
one.
David.
Go ahead.
It's me. Sorry. Let's talk about South Florida here. Probably no team in the country has two better wins through the first couple of weeks than South Florida. Pulling an upset as a 17.5-point dog last week in the Swamp. Now they're going to head to Miami to take on the Hurricanes. It looks like this number's gone up a little bit, or right around the same, 17.5, 18 points here. We thought the Gators would have too many bodies in the trenches last week. USF actually out first down the Gators, outgained them in the Swamp. Similar test against a loaded Miami team here. Carson Beck's looked really good for the Canes. You know, we've talked about he fits right in with all those exotic cars on South Beach. But what do you like here with USF, a team with all the momentum in the world, getting a lot of points at Miami this week, Phil?
Yeah, not one of my favorite plays of the week whatsoever, because it's tough to go against South Florida. But I'm going to lean with Miami because you wonder how much does USF have left in the tank after knocking off two ranked teams. Now you got to do it again. We see teams in a letdown spread after knocking off one ranked team. How about knocking off two? And last week, I think Florida basically shot itself in the foot. They had so many major mistakes during that course of the game that left South Florida in it. And then, like late in the game, they had that play where he throws a pass behind the line of scrimmage, 3 Florida Gators there, and he somehow slips through and gains like 30, 40 yards down the sideline. So I thought Florida just played an extremely sloppy game last week. Miami, I liked Coach Cristobal's comments after the game when they played Bethune-Cookman. They only won the game 45-3. So things like, hey, what about the offense? Bethune-Cookman, he said, tried to slow the football down. We only had so many possessions, basically scored a touchdown on every possession. We just didn't have a lot of possessions, and that's why that one was closer than expected. So I'm going to go with Miami at home. I was impressed with that big offensive line sort of pushed around Notre Dame's defensive line at times.
So the Cinderella story will come to an end, says Phil Steele, for South Florida in Coral Gables, or Miami Gardens, excuse me, this weekend. All right, we just talked about them. The Ohio Bobcats, another Cinderella story as they knocked off West Virginia last week at home in Athens. Now they get an even bigger task. They have to go to Ohio State and beat the Buckeyes at 2-0. Ohio State, as predicted, a supreme favorite by 30.5, 7 o'clock kickoff. The Bobcats ran all over West Virginia last week, nearly 200 yards on the ground. First meeting now with Ohio State since 20-10. They shut out Grambling last week, 70-0. Julian Sayan's been nearly perfect, 31 of 39. Jeremiah Smith has absolutely put on a spectacle, 11 catches, 162 yards in 2 games. He's 23 yards away from becoming the fastest Ohio State receiver to reach 1,500 career receiving yards. I don't really think you can call this a sandwich spot with Ohio State with a bye next weekend. You think Ohio State's going to cover this lofty spread against Ohio, Phil?
Yeah, not anywhere near a sandwich spot. In fact, last week, I think my computer called for Ohio State to beat Grambling 67-0, and they won 70-0. So it's pretty much as expected. It was not a contest. You can't read anything into that. And with Ohio, I like this team. I like Parker Navarro. I think he's a very dangerous quarterback to contend with. But I'm going to go back to last year's game against Kentucky. You turn on the set, you're about to watch the game, and then all of a sudden, hey, Parker Navarro's not going to play, and their starting center's not going to play, and this guy's not going to play, and this guy's not going to play. What happened? They saved those players and ended up winning the MAC last year for the first time since 1968. So it wouldn't surprise me if they're down and the game becomes unwinnable in the second half, that you see Ohio pull a lot of their starters and not play them. Remember, they lost that Kentucky game 41-6. So I think play Ohio maybe in the first half. Parker Navarro's going to be excited playing in Ohio Stadium. I think Ohio State's going to be taking on a tougher opponent than they did last week. Then take Ohio State in the second half, and I think the Buckeyes pull away at the end. I'll lay the points with Ohio State in this one.
All right, another one excited to see in the late night, 2-0 Arkansas traveling to Oxford to take on number 17 Ole Miss. The Rebels currently laying 7.5 at home. Another team, we still need to figure out who Arkansas truly is. They've taken care of business like they should against Alabama A&M and Arkansas State. Taylon Green's looked super sharp, 10 touchdowns, 561 yards through the air, nearly 200 yards and a score on the ground. He's been able to spread the ball around a ton. 7 different wide receivers with a touchdown catch so far. The Rebels survived in Lexington. Didn't cover, but they survived last week, 30-23. They looked ugly early, though, Phil. 2 picks, a 10-0 hole. They end up outgaining Kentucky by 100 yards, ran for 220 late. Biggest thing I saw in that game, 5 for 5 in red zone scoring for Ole Miss. Wasn't all touchdowns, but they scored every time they were in the red zone. I think that's important to note. Ole Miss has won the last 2. They creamed them in Fayetteville last year by 32. What do you got, Ole Miss hosting Arkansas and laying more than a touchdown?
Yeah, and prior to last year's game, I had used Arkansas in this series religiously, and they had won 5 and covered 5 in a row in the series. And Sam Pittman, a tremendous road dog. I'll go back to 2 years ago when they played that gauntlet. They had 4 real tough games, all away from home, all in back to back, and they almost won 3 of them. Ended up with 3 close losses and then just 1 blowout win. I'll say this, though. I had Arkansas last year, and oh, my Lord, I wanted to shut that TV off in the second half. In fact, I moved it from one of my main TVs all the way up here where I didn't have to watch every play because it was flat out ugly. Ole Miss just scored touchdowns every single time they had the ball. However, their quarterback last year was Jackson Dart, who had a 25-6 ratio and could shred a defense. This year, their quarterback's Austin Simmons, and you know what his ratio is? 3 touchdown passes, 4 interceptions this year.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to be a really good quarterback, but he's not the NFL caliber Jackson Dart quite yet. And when you look at Arkansas last year, they started out the season slow. Taylon Green had a negative ratio. His first 5 games got a lot better in the Bobby Petrino offense in the second half of the year, and he showed that this year so far with the 10-2 ratio. Pittman's back in the role he thrives in. Away dog, especially getting over a touchdown. He'll keep this one close, potentially even pull the upset. I like Arkansas plus the points in this one, despite the fact I had Arkansas last year. I will remind you I had Arkansas the previous 5 years, and they covered all 5 times.
Woo pig.
All right, let's stay in the SEC. Florida on the road at LSU this week. Now, as a Seminole fan, I'm never going to feel bad for the Gators. So I'll admit I was looking through my golf bag to see if I had any cigars left in there after South Florida beat them last week. But I do wonder what that game last week, just how much of an effect it's going to have on the line this week. I had to think maybe it would be a little bit tighter, but now we're seeing LSU favored by 7.5 at home. Is there any value in your eyes, Phil, to this Gator team that, you know, their coach needs a bounce back, this team needs a bounce back, like they need air right now?
Yeah, and LSU's playing with revenge, so that's another big thing. I frankly thought the number would climb. I thought everybody would be all over LSU after Florida's performance. I thought the number would go to 10. There must be some smart bettors out there that are keeping this thing down at 7.5. I think it's going to be a tight, low-scoring game. You look at Florida; they have been playing really good defense all year. Did give up 20 first downs last week, but as mentioned, had a couple problems here and there. And I think maybe they were looking ahead a little bit to LSU. They were a big favorite in that game. And with LSU, they're playing excellent defense. I've been really impressed. Holding Clemson to 13 first downs. Last week, I liked the under in that game against Louisiana Tech, and boy, did that thing go under. In fact, LSU needed a late score to make it 23-7. I just think it's going to be a tighter, low-scoring game. And with that said, I would lean with the points, but I also like the under in this. What do you guys got for the current total?
47.5.
Yeah, I'll go under 47.5.
Okay.
Yeah. Should have hammered that under last week as well. It was looking a little dicey early for LSU. Louisiana Tech with an early pick. Our man, former Phil Steele co-host Kyle Schasberger on the call. So it's good to hear Kyle have some highlights in Baton Rouge. We know he was charged up for that one. By the way, early happy birthday to Kyle Schasberger tomorrow. So happy birthday to Kyle. All right, Phil. Let's go to South Bend. Ranked matchup of the evening slate. Number 16 Texas A&M at number 8 Notre Dame. 7:30 kickoff. Notre Dame went to College Station last year, won this game by 10, 23-13. The Irish are coming off a bye. They lost to Miami in their opener, 27-24. They've had an extra week to prepare for this Texas A&M team. Meanwhile, A&M first game on the road this year. We're going to find out who they really are. They played UTSA and Utah State to open the year, won handily both times. For the Aggies, the story on offense has been big plays. 23 plays of 20 or more yards through 2 games. The defensive special teams have been incredibly solid. They're top 15 in punt and kick return yardage and in tackles for loss and quarterback sacks. This is also a return game for Texas A&M head coach Mike Elko, who was Notre Dame's defensive coordinator back in 2017. A&M 2-0, Notre Dame 0-1, but the Irish laying just under a touchdown at home by 6.5. What you got here, Phil?
Yeah, I like the 6.5. Frankly, I had Notre Dame by 7, so I'll take a minus 6.5. They have a really good record against ranked teams at home. They have a really good record as a home favorite. And, Mike Elko, actually, I believe he's only covered 3 of his games at Texas A&M so far, which is surprising. I like these Aggies. With Concepcion, a receiver, I think that makes them more dangerous. They're loaded in the backfield. But this is a Notre Dame team that in the opener struggled on the road. C.J. Carr, I thought, looked good, though. And C.J. Carr's now back at home. They got to get Love and Price going here. Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price. That's one of the better running back combos out there. And Jeremiah Love was on the, we're like, where's he at in the first half of that game against Miami? I think we'll see him play a bigger factor here. I like the Irish to win this one by about a touchdown. So as long as you're laying under a touchdown, I'll take Notre Dame. Over a touchdown, I really don't have an interest.
Yep, keep an eye on that line there. Right now, we are getting 6.5, so it should be good to play. We should have a heck of a game in Willie Bryce on Saturday night. Maybe a little under the radar game for this slate. Diego Pavia, Vanderbilt at South Carolina. Pavia working his magic last week. Does he have any left for this week? We all know USC's got a really good quarterback of their own in Sellers. The Gamecocks laying 4.5 at home. And just to be nice, I'll say their offense hasn't looked great so far. They haven't really needed it because Virginia Tech seemed to keep shooting themselves in the foot in the opener. Lesser competition last week, but it's just something to keep an eye on. The series history says South Carolina is going to win. They're 10-0 going back to 2015, and they've covered in all but 2 of those. One was a push. Last year's meeting, it was 28-7. Gamecocks a winner in Nashville. But, Phil, it just feels like it's a different Vandy team this year.
Yeah, and last year I used South Carolina as a best bet in my weekly newsletter Inside the Press Box. Loved every minute of the game. They won, I think, 28-7. Very comfortable win on the road. Now we're at home. You got to think I like South Carolina again, right? Well, no. I mean, when you look at these two teams, let's look at the Virginia Tech comparison. South Carolina struggled with Virginia Tech, got out first down, outgained, and that was with a South Carolina pro crowd. Meanwhile, Vanderbilt went into Virginia Tech, one of the toughest venues to go into, and while they were down at the half, they just absolutely dominated the second half. I don't know if Virginia Tech got a first down in the second half. They finished with a massive 242-yard edge in the game. And Diego Pavia is amazing. And, when I talked to Clark Lee, he was a very confident head coach in the offseason. Feels they are, not just, we're Vandy, we can get to 6-7 wins. That's not their goal this year. And as you mentioned, South Carolina last week had 2 punt return touchdowns and a defensive touchdown and scored 35 points against South Carolina State. I like Vandy to keep this one close and potentially even pull the upset.
Phil's all aboard the Commodore train, folks. You heard it here first. When I was in Atlanta at SEC Media Days, the 2 guys that I took the most away from were Clark Lee and Diego Pavia. After speaking to Clark Lee, I wanted to run through a brick wall for Vanderbilt football, and I have no connection to Vanderbilt football. Clark just was that convincing. And then Diego Pavia, we all know about the persona he puts out online, but the confidence and the swag that he oozes. I mean, you can't not believe in this Vanderbilt team with Clark Lee as the head coach and Diego Pavia as the quarterback. Speaking of quarterbacks, we're coming to the game that I'm focused on the most, and it's because my alma mater is involved. The Darien Mensa Bowl is here, folks. Coming back with the Duke Blue Devils to Yeoman Stadium to face Tulane at 2-0. This line has played jump rope all week. Tulane opened as a 2.5-point favorite. It shifted towards Duke, and as of this morning, Tulane is favored again by 1.5. Duke did lose by a lot last week to Illinois at home, 45-19, but they played a lot better than the score showed. Darien Mensa's had a couple of 300-plus passing yard games in both games. Tulane, meanwhile, survived on the road against South Alabama. They did not look good doing so. I watched a lot of that game, and I was not impressed. Thank God they hung on for Tulane faithful everywhere. The last time these two teams met, 2015, I was there. I was on the sidelines, and Tanner Lee threw more passes to me than he did to Tulane receivers. So it was a tough one to watch. I certainly hope this game goes a lot better for the Olive and Blue. What you got, Phil? Tulane and Duke. Don't break my heart.
I think it's tough to go against either team here. When you look at Duke, you hit it right on the head. Last week against Illinois, I had Illinois, and I'm like, damn. I mean, Duke had a 240 to 132-yard edge at the half. Illinois, with the outstanding offensive line, couldn't block these guys, couldn't give protection. They got a couple of fortunate plays. They were +5 in turnovers, and that's why the final score was 45-19. I thought Duke, for a good portion of the game, was actually the better team, especially in the first half. And Tulane, take away the start of the game where they gave South Alabama a couple of scores, and then remember they led by 14 late, and South Alabama scored a couple late. I thought Tulane played well on the inside the game. I will take Mensah over Retzlaff quarterback-wise, but I think Tulane's at home. I don't really have a call on this game. I could go either way because Duke is off a misleading final where they were much closer than the 45-19 final would indicate, but Tulane's tough at home, as we saw against Northwestern. I'll let you guys pick this one.
Trip, I'm abstaining. I'm not picking it. Can't do it.
I want our guy Daryl Turner here in the chat to pay. He's had a pick for everything. We need to have this guy on the show. Maybe he can pick Duke and Tulane for us. It's another game. I really don't know what to think. Duke absolutely, to me, even though they were behind, looked like they were, like you said, they were outplaying Illinois for so long in that game, but it just spiraled out of control in that fourth quarter. But let's see if DT hits us up with a pick there in the chat, and we can mention that later. Let's go to Minnesota. Minnesota's on the road at Cal this week, and let's just try to say the guy's name: Jaron Kiave Songapulatele. Remember the name, learn the name, because I think he's going to be a special player for Cal at quarterback this year. Like I said, the Bears have Minnesota in Berkeley this week. They're home dogs. I'm seeing the line at 2.5 right now that the Gophers are favored by. The Gophers last week, they beat Northwestern State like they were just mad at them for some kind of deeply personal reason. It was 59-0 at halftime. I think most of Northwestern's yardage came on kickoff returns because there were so many of them. But what do you like here between Minnesota and Cal, Phil?
Yeah, Northwestern State's one of the worst FCS teams, so don't take too much into that. But you had to be impressed with 59-0. Interception return for a touchdown, first play of the game. And everything it just rolled downhill. I like what I'm seeing out of Drake Lindsey. Coach Fleck is very high on him this year. He's got a 3-1 ratio so far, which is good. It is his first road start. And Sagapolatelli looked great against Oregon State. Now, last week, they didn't cover against Texas Southern, but they're back at home. I think it's a tough situation. I can make a case for both teams, but I'm going to lean with Minnesota here. They're the more veteran team. I like their offensive line. I think Lindsey can have a good game here on the road. And the one thing I'm going to mention is Fleck feels that their run game might be one of the best run games he's had. I mean, he's got Darius Taylor. They've had numerous, as always, they have a deep backfield, and they've got a solid offensive line. So I'm going to go with Minnesota minus the cheap price in this one.
By the way, our guy DT did chime in the chat. He loves the over with Duke and Tulane. That's his play.
Over. He
says over 53.5 points. I don't hate that. I don't hate that one. I think that's a solid pick. Last one of the night. We're chasing late night. 10:30 p.m. kickoff. Texas State at Arizona State. Arizona State went to Mississippi State, came back. They were down 17-0, had a lead with 2 minutes to go, and Blake Shapen broke their hearts with Brendan Thompson, a 58-yard touchdown. Got an interception on Arizona State's next play from scrimmage. They win 24-20. Texas State, meanwhile, survived against UTSA in the Alamo Dome last weekend to win the I-35 showdown. Bo Sparks was insane. 5 catches, 155 yards, a 73-yard reception, a 65-yard touchdown reception. Phil, the Bobcats have put up 40 points in both games in 2025, but Arizona State, as expected, probably laying a comfortable 16.5 at home, and the total, 60.5. They expect points in this game. What do you think?
Yeah, I expect points in the game as well. And I think when you take a look at Texas State, the interesting thing when I talked to Coach Kinney is he feels that this year's quarterbacks, and it's Brad Jackson, who's having a good year, have more arm strength. They're able to use more of their offense. And you go back to last year's game, remember Texas State was at home. It was like a Thursday night game or a Friday night game, one of those two. And Texas State was favored, and they're winning 21-7 at home. And then Arizona State came back, tied it at the half, and pulled out the win. But it was a close game. And now Arizona State's laying over 2 touchdowns at home against what I feel is maybe a more potent Texas State offense than what they had last year. They still have Lincoln Perry back at running back. And, Sam Leavitt struggled last week, hitting just 10 of 23 passes against Mississippi State. Now, granted, he's back at home, should do better, but I think it's going to be one of those back and forth scoring games. I'm taking the big points here with Texas State.
Okay. We get any interest in the over there? I'm seeing 60.5.
Yeah, I would say over would be a good play, but I'd like Texas State more than the over.
Okay. All right. Well, let's see what you like the most of everything this week. Why don't you go ahead and give us your top 3 plays of the week?
Yeah, and they're all 3 games that we've already broken down, so I don't have to go in depth about them. I do like Houston on Friday night, laying the small price against Colorado with an offense. I like USC in the contender versus pretender game. And I also like Georgia. I think you're going to see a completely different Georgia team than you saw the first 2 weeks. And I think that Tennessee's offense is going to struggle against the first defense that they really play. Remember, Tennessee's got a completely rebuilt offense this year. So those are my 3 plays.
All right. David Kahn, do you
Yes,
want to
sir.
give us one play this week? You're doing really good when we keep it at 1. So what's your one play?
Well, I gave you my lock. It's Pitt to cover the backyard brawl by 6.5. Do I need
right.
do,
Yeah, you
do I need
already
to give
gave-
another?
Trip, you paying
No.
attention?
You don't have to. I forgot. You like Pitt. I kind of
Yeah.
like Pitt too myself.
I mean, I don't like Pitt. Let's hold on. Let's put it out here. I don't like Pitt,
You're
but I
picking-
think they're going to cover. Let's watch our language here with that word like. I don't like Pitt, but I think they're going to cover. That's the pick. You got it.
All right. Well, we've hit an hour here, Phil. We appreciate the time. Is there anything else you want to plug here? I think, David, did we not have a comment about inside the press
We
box
did. We
earlier?
had our man Arthur R. By the way, thank you to everybody for tuning into the show. We've had upwards of 50 people viewing the show, and you all have been commenting in. We appreciate the interaction. Arthur R. was asking, he's not sure where he is at on Inside the Press Box subscription. How does he check where he's at? So, Phil, you want to give the details on Inside the Press Box?
Yeah, if you have any questions on Inside the Press Box, you can email Todd at philsteele.com. But we put it out on Thursdays, generally around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, as soon as we get it all wrapped up. And Inside the Press Box, of course, you use my plays and the computer's plays, which, by the way, went 6-1 again last week. It's me versus the computer, and my computers beat me the first 2 years, for crying out loud. But you get a lot of winners with Inside the Press Box. And then don't forget to take the Phil Steele Plus Tour with selections. It's up and available right now. You get yourself 5 selections, 6 quick hitters. And last week, there was all the selections combined to go 10-5. So make sure you check that out. It gives you complete reasoning behind each play. Just go to philsteele.com and click right on the front menu.
All right, Dave, you want to give out the home field promo one more time?
Yep. So home field, just a reminder, if you're in the Philadelphia area, they are there with Oklahoma this week as the Sooners go to Lincoln Financial Field to battle the Temple Owls. Should be a good one. Phil's got Temple covering that massive spread, by the way, if you missed that earlier in the show. But Oklahoma, couple of events Friday night and Saturday. The details are on Home Field Apparel's Instagram and Twitter pages. It's Home Field Apparel on Instagram, Home Field Apparel without the E on Twitter, on X, whatever you call it. Go to homefieldapparel.com, though. Use the code PHIL15. That's Phil, PHIL 15 for 15% off your first order. Homefieldapparel.com. We supremely appreciate having Home Field as a sponsor here on the Phil Steele Show. Gear's on the way, folks. It'll be here soon. I'm repping gear right now. We'll have more to come.
Yeah, just got a comment from Sean York who said press box was excellent last week. And one last pick from the 4th member of our show now, Daryl Turner, DT. He says he agrees with the over in Texas State, Arizona State. All right, guys, that's the show. Please watch us on YouTube. Follow along Phil on Twitter, Phil at PhilSteele042, and listen to the podcast in your college sports now feed. We appreciate all the love here, and we will talk to you again next Thursday when we're breaking down week 4 here on the Phil Steele Show.
Have a good one, guys.